Killarney Historic Rally might mark the end of the season for some, but for crews in the 2025 Napa Auto Parts Irish Tarmac Rally Championship, it kicks off the 2025 Historic Championship season as round one of the series. Alongside the historic event, we have the modified rally, and with two-time World Rally champion Killarney taking part in the modified event, the atmosphere outside the Killarney Towers Hotel the evening before the rally was electric, and the crews were looking forward to tackling the infamous stages over the weekend.
How does it feel to get the opportunity to compete against last year's World Rally champion in your hometown in a modified car?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's like I was just saying there, it's a chance we'll never get again without spending probably €500,000. So look, we'll take it, we'll embrace it, we'll welcome him here, and hopefully he might come back again for another run. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we go.
Everyone inside the top 15 is unbelievable, like, so.
Isn't it, really?
And I'm looking forward to see how Calais gets on with everyone else. Like, I've never seen something exciting as like tonight. Like, it's just.
They could be calling you Calais O'Callaghan tomorrow.
I doubt it. It could be upside down. They could be calling me Callum McRae.
Yeah, it's so cool. So many passionate people, so many super cool cars also on the race. So I'm just looking forward for tomorrow and having a lot of fun.
Onto the stages, and the early leaders were Eamon Kelly and Conor Mohan, opening up a 4.7 second advantage by the end of stage 2. Sadly for the pair though, their lead of the event would be short-lived, and it was game over on stage 3. So that handed the lead to Dona Kelly and Rory Kennedy. They were settling in nicely. They felt that there could be more to come from the car in those stages, but they weren't committing 100% at this stage. They should have been scrapping with a number of crews, one of those being Johnny Greer and Niall Burns, but a turbo pipe issue on the opening stage saw them lose power and time, and they ended the morning down in 19th place overall. Reigning historic champion Thomas Davis was back, with Shane Buckley in the co-driver's seat for the weekend, and it was going well for the pair so far as they lay in second. There was an issue with the rev counter not working at the start of stage 1, so that was a slight distraction, but they had a trouble-free morning otherwise. Fellow Welsh driver Neil Williams, with Anthony O'Sullivan alongside, were finding the conditions tricky. They didn't want to throw it off at this early stage, and there were plenty of places that you could do just that, so they had a steady but competitive start to the day in third. The changeable grip was an issue for many, as Dennis Moynihan and Martin O'Brien explained when they reached the end of the stage. They'd also found the full tank of fuel to be unsettling the car to start with, thanks to the extra weight. Fourth place for the pair for now, 7.6 seconds back from third. John O'Donnell and Paddy Robinson would also make a cautious start, but they were more than happy with how things were going, as they rounded off the morning loop of stages in 5th place overall. For Fergus O'Mara and Mikey Galvin, it would be 6th place. They were settling in well, still more to give at this stage, but the times were close right throughout the top of the results. In fact, it was close back to 7th place overall as well. Ray Breen and Damien Morrissey in the Subaru Legacy occupied that place, just 0.8 of a second back from the BMW pair ahead after 3 stages. Alan Ring and Adrian Deasy had made a cautious start to the day, probably a bit more so than they would have wanted. They ended the morning in 8th place overall and still felt there was time to be had from those stages for the next loop after service. John Bonner and Damien McGettigan were more than happy with the times. In fact, they were just happy to be competing here amongst such a quality entry. They finished stage 3 in 9th place overall. And rounding out the top 10 in the historics would be Tom Clark and Alistair Wiley. They hadn't been out in the car in a while and it felt good, with less than a minute separating the entire top 10 at this point on the event. So, with 3 stages completed here in Killarney, the results so far in the historics looked like this. A look now at the modified rally, and sadly for the visiting world champions Kalle Rovanperä and Jani Haltunen, there would be trouble on the first stage of the event, the car coming to a stop just before reaching the spectators at Moll's Gap. The pair would eventually get the car going with the help of spectators and took the next stage a little cautiously as they made sure the issue didn't come back, ending the morning with a second fastest time overall on stage 3, but unfortunately the chance of overall victory was gone. So with the Toyota pair out of the fight, the leaders were Rob Duggan and Ger Conway. A great time on stage 1 would be the reason for that lead, although throttle position sensor issues were causing some concerns for the pair as they were struggling to get full throttle from the car during the morning. Declan Gallagher and John McCarthy had actually gone faster than the leaders over stages 2 and 3 in the morning, but Duggan's lead on the gap was keeping the Starlet pair from taking the number 1 spot for now. They were suffering a little themselves. Their issue was with the car understeering, and they just couldn't get the feeling in the front end of the car. Colin and Kieran O'Donoghue were also having issues. So far not many were having a clean run. Their car was going into limp mode intermittently over the first couple of stages, and they didn't really know what the issue was. So for now it would be third, and keeping their fingers crossed that they could resolve the issue in service. One crew missing from the results would be Kevin Eves and Chris Merry, and sadly this would be the only time we saw the pair as they retired on the opening stage just past our cameras. Conor Murphy and Sean Collins were going well, getting themselves up to 4th place overall. Unfortunately, that would come to an end when the pair crashed out over the finish line of stage 3. So, for now, the pair were showing on the results in 4th, but they would go no further, and that place would be up for grabs in the next loop. Poised to take that place were Gary Kiernan and John McCabe. The conditions weren't as bad as they'd been expecting, however, they were struggling a little on some of the medium-speed corners. This was the first time back out in the Escort after a season in the Rally 2 car though, so it would take some getting used to again. 5th place for now. Jonathan Pringle and Pierce O'Callaghan were having some issues with the power steering. It was fine to start with, but after a few kilometres it would start to go. Not ideal with these tricky stages, but there would be nothing they could do about it until service, so they ended the morning in 6th overall. Daniel McKenna and Andrew Grennan felt that they were braking a little too early in places. They were enjoying the day, but there was still a bit more to get if they could get into a rhythm in the next loop of stages. Chris Armstrong and Darren Curran were another pair taking a little time to get into things. They would get closer to the pace they wanted by the end of stage 3 though, and would be able to start trying to climb the leaderboard. For now though, it was 8th. Things were going well for David Moffat and Martin Connolly. They were also settling into a pace they were comfortable with and would end the morning in 9th. The car though got a little too hot by the end of stage 3, so they would need to look at that. Rounding out the top 10 for now would be John Dugan and Paul Lennon. An issue with the paddle shift wasn't ideal, and a puncture added more time lost to that as well, but still 10th place was a good way to end the morning despite those issues. A little way back from the top 10, there would be a family battle going on, with Conor Shanahan and Andy Hayes leading the way there from 22nd place overall in the Escort. And it would be close, with Jack Shanahan and Mikey Walsh just half a second back on the times after stage 3. Neither of them had been in the car since March, so it was taking some time to get back into things, although some smoke from the back of the Corona at the end of stage 3 would need looking at. One crew not having much luck early on were Gabriel Fowey and Neve Pickens. They spun on stage 1 and clipped a bank, luckily with minimal damage, and with a bit of manoeuvring they were able to spin the car back around and get going again to finish the stage. So, with the morning complete for the modified crews, the results at the top looked like this.
Well, Rob, we know you had some problems this morning, but how's it been going since?
Yeah, gap was good, but the other two we've had a throttle resistance sensor issue, so the power's cutting in and out. We keep sliding bits with it, so it was just a case of get back to service here and try and fix it and go out and see can we take a chunk of time on the gap again and just match them in the other two. So yeah, we'll hope for the best we get it fixed here.
Declan second in the modified this morning after the first loop. How are you finding it?
Good. It's sloppy there this morning on the gap. You know, we kind of struggled a wee bit with the front of the car and stuff, but no, overall we're happy enough. You know, we had a respectable enough time in the first stage, and I think we might have been quickest on stage 2 and 3. So no, happy to be this far now, and if we can keep doing that now for the rest of the day, we'll be happy enough. You know.
Well, Callie, it is lovely to meet you. I'm sure you've been well welcomed to Ireland. How did you find the first 3 stages this morning?
Pretty good. Already
in the morning the moles gap felt really good until we had some electrical issue with the car. It just shut down, unfortunately. But I think we had a good run up till that point. So yeah, a lot of fun after that. Just checking the car on the middle stage that there is no issues. We couldn't really know what the issue was. The guy still didn't find it. So yeah, let's see on the afternoon. Hopefully the car works, but it's gonna be a fun afternoon.
On to the next loop of stages, a repeat of the mornings, and things hadn't got any easier. But there would be no change at the top in the historic rally, as Dona Kelly and Rory Kennedy got through in a good, clean fashion to keep hold of that lead, and in fact extend it to 37 seconds. They still had the advantage over Thomas Davis and Shane Buckley, who caught a car on this loop of stages, but it didn't cause any issues and they kept the leaders in their sights for now. Sadly, we lost Neil Williams and Anthony O'Sullivan. They'd taken a gamble on running slicks for this loop, which was entirely the wrong choice, so they likely would have slipped down the results in any case. Things were going much better for Alan Ring and Adrian Deasy. They were a lot faster on this loop than they were in the morning, and it showed on the results as the pair ended the second loop of stages in third place on the leaderboard. John O'Donnell and Paddy Robinson were still in the fight for the podium, but they were driving at their own pace now, not wanting to get too caught up in battles and risk the consequences. Thankfully, their own pace was fast enough and they ended the morning in fourth. Fergus O'Mara and Mikey Galvin needed to tidy things up. They reported clipping something on the first stage of the loop and had missed a few gear changes as well. They were still going well though, despite those little issues, and ended this loop in fifth. Kyan McCourt and Barry McNulty were now having a much better loop. They were able to push in a few more places while still respecting the changeable conditions. 7th place overall for now, and clearly getting to grips with things again. The times were looking good for Mark Falvey and James O'Brien, faster over this loop than they'd been in the morning, and they'd need that extra speed as they had a few people looking to take 7th overall away from them. One of those crews looking to climb the results were John Bonner and Damien McGettigan. They were having a trouble-free run, which also meant they were enjoying themselves too. They ended stage 6 in 8th overall. One crew we hadn't seen yet was the previously 4th place Dennis Moynihan and Martin O'Brien. They had a spin on stage 4, which saw them drop down a few places into 9th with 2 stages remaining. Another pair who were fighting back were Johnny Greer and Niall Burns. They set 2 fastest times over the course of the morning to start a comeback from that previous throttle issue, and were now up into 10th place overall. So, 6 out of 8 stages complete, and the results at the top had changed slightly, but that lead was still safe for Dona Kelly in the BMW. Back to the modified event, and there wouldn't be any change for the leaders Rob Duggan and Ger Conway. They tried to fix the throttle issue and things were looking good for now, but for how long was anyone's guess. They were able to put in some good times and in fact extended their lead to 16 seconds. After losing around 5 minutes in the morning, Kalle Rovanperä and Jani Hultinen were at least back at the sharp end in terms of stage times. They set fastest times on 2 out of the 3 stages, including Moll's Gap, and beating Rob Duggan on that stage showed some serious pace. Declan Gallagher and John McCarthy had a moment on the first stage of the loop, the conditions not seeming to improve any over the second pass, but they got away with it and ended stage 6 in second. However, they were having an issue with the power steering through the later stages of the loop. Colin and Kieran O'Donoghue took a gamble on slicks for this loop, and it's safe to say it was the wrong choice. They had a few moments on the stages, but thankfully without any major problems, and they reached the end of this loop on the final step of the podium for now.
Steady up, Con, steady up, flat to right. 60, flat to right in the poles, watch the water, let one win.
Daniel McKenna and Andrew Brennan were struggling a little with the car in this loop. They weren't sure what the issue really was, but they would have to take a look at it in service. They ended stage 6 in 4th overall. With their earlier steering issues sorted, it was a much better loop for Jonathan Pringle and Piers O'Callaghan. They were having to slow a little for some of the worst parts of the stages, but they were still much faster this time out and lay in 5th. Gary Kiernan and John McKay didn't feel they were committed enough through this loop of stages, not really gaining any time over their last run through, But importantly, they didn't lose any time either and were in 6th place. John Dugan and Paul Lennon were having problems with the wipers not clearing the rain fast enough at times, so that forced them to back off a little in a few places, but things were still going okay for them in 7th place. Chris Armstrong and Darren Curran clipped a rock on stage 5, causing them to pick up a puncture a few kilometres from the end of the stage. They dropped a little time, but still held on to a top 10 position in 8th. David Moffat and Martin Connolly made the wrong tyre choice on this loop. With lots of standing water out there on the stages, they were struggling to commit quite as much as they should have, rounding this loop off in 9th overall. Completing the top 10 were Patrick McHugh and Porrick O'Donnell. Their day hadn't been without a few wild moments, but they got through in one piece with 2 stages remaining. So, with those 2 stages left, including one in the dark, the results in the modified rally looked like this. On to the final stages then. One stage repeated with the second pass in the dark, and with no service in between them, it would be a tough tyre choice for the crews. One crew who seemed to get that choice wrong was Stephen O'Sullivan and John Fleming. They spun their Escort in the wet conditions on stage 7, hopefully their only issue as they went into the next stage in the dark. Before we take a look at the final results, let's just check in on a few of the class winners. Taking the win in Class 2 would be Colin Fitzgerald and Ian McCarthy, who finished in 55th place overall in the Escort. In Class 5, it would be Douglas Crowley and Dennis Nagel who took the win with 29th place on the overall results too. A few places higher on the overall results would be the Class 3 winners, Cale McCare and Podge Doody. They had a good run to take that class win by a few minutes. Class 4 would go to Martin McGee and Carl Reid. They finished with a big advantage in that class as well by the end of the event. And our Class 6 winners would finish just outside the top 10 overall in 11th. Aidan Bourke and Pierce Doney Jr. taking that place and the class honours. Sadly, this weekend wasn't to be for Kalle Rovanperä and Jani Hultanen. Their time lost on stage 1 would mean they finished in 15th place overall. But if you take stage 1 out of the equation, they would have finished on the podium, giving the pair a great reason to come back and try again soon. Into the top 10, and it would be a self-confessed terrible day on the stages for Christopher O'Callaghan and Kane Trina. But it can't have been all bad, as the pair secured that 10th place overall in the Escort. For Patrick McHugh and Porrick O'Donnell, it would be 9th, gaining that 1 place in the final stages and happy enough with how things had gone. Hopefully going out with the correct tyre choice this time would be David Moffat and Martin Connolly. They managed to gain 1 more place on the overall results to take 8th, and the pair enjoyed seeing the finish line of such a tough event. There were no issues on the final stages for Chris Armstrong and Darren Curran. They were happy with how things had gone and would take 7th place this weekend. John Dugan and Paul Lennon felt there was still more to give, but sadly they ran out of stages. At least they could see whether seconds could be made up for next time. They took 3rd place in Class 7 and 6th overall. Someone who couldn't see whether time could be made up, in fact they couldn't see it all in places, were Jonathan Pringle and Pierce O'Callaghan. The lights failing on the car on the final stage and sending them into a bank. They would get going again, but with no lights and lost time, they dropped down to 52nd overall. Gary Kiernan and John McCabe would be happy with 5th place this weekend. It hadn't been an easy event, but they put in some good times throughout the weekend. But as fun as the Escort was, it'll be back to the Rally 2 car for the 2025 season. Just outside the podium places at the finish were Daniel McKenna and Andrew Graham. Their 4th place overall was enough for 3rd in Class 1 as well, so it would be a good end to the weekend for the pair. Some last-minute issues with the clutch pedal must have been a worry for Colin and Kieran O'Donoghue, but thankfully they got the car to the finish of the event and onto the final step of the podium as well for their efforts.
Well done, Mac.
Declan Gallagher and John McCarthy would be more than happy with their result and had enjoyed the battles all day, especially with visiting WRC champion Rovanperä. It's not often you get to compete against world champions in similar cars, and this was the reason that Gallagher decided to come and do the event. A fantastic weekend to remember, with 2nd place overall. But taking the win would be Robert Duggan and Jar Conway. They had their issues and managed them well, and would even hit something on the final stage of the event, but that didn't stop them as they took the win here for the second year in a row. So, with the modified event complete, here's a reminder of how those overall results looked. On then to the Historic Rally, and a look at those class winners first. Taking the B3 class win would be Tom and Helen Slattery in 44th overall. Liam Regan made the switch back to the driving seat to compete again in the Skoda. With Andrew Bush alongside, they took the F1 class win in 43rd overall. There'd be a number of classes with only one finisher, and one of those would be the F3 class, with John Mead and Owen Mulcahy taking that win with 40th overall in the Peugeot. Another would be Ed Colton and Enda Shields, who took the C2 class win, finishing the event in 39th place overall. Just ahead of them on the overall leaderboard were David Goose and Ashley Trimble, the pair taking the D2 class as well in 38th. One place higher overall would be the C3 class winners, Ray Hilliard and Senan Raggett, the escort pair taking the class win and 37th overall. 35th overall and winning the F2 class were Gary Rogers and Eric Callan in the Vauxhall Nova. It would be the fantastic Volvo of Peter and William Neville who took the B4 class as they ended the event in 29th place overall. And another Volvo took the win in the B5 class, with James O'Mahony and Gary Gallagher taking the win in 25th overall. Padda and Grace Walsh brought their Mark I Escort home in one piece to take the C5 class win, as well as 22nd overall. Even more variety to the results in 13th place overall, as Andy Johnson and Jim McSherry claimed the D3 class win at the end of the event. On to the top 10, and it would be 10th for Dennis Moynihan and Martin O'Brien. They changed tyres for the last pair of stages, and that worked well, a good finish for the pair. It would be 9th for John Bonner and Damien McGettigan. They got to the finish in one piece, which was a relief as the pair had borrowed the car for this event. Sadly, there'd be some lost time for Fergus O'Mara and Mikey Galvin when they had a half spin on the last pair of stages. They would just be driving to get to the finish now and settle for that 8th place overall. As far as comebacks go, it would be a great end to the event for Johnny Greer and Niall Burns. It felt strange to be in no man's land for some of the event, but they did manage to get back up as high as 7th overall by the end, a good finish given their earlier turbo problems. Mark Falvey and James O'Brien would be happy with their 6th place finish, and that would also be enough to win them the B1 class as well, so a good result for the escort pair. Alan Ring and Adrian Deasy would be struggling a little again with the standing water. They got to the end of the event though without any issues and took 5th place overall for their efforts. It took a while for Karen McCourt and Barry McNulty to get into the groove, but when they did, the times kept on coming. They managed to get as high as 4th place this weekend and took the D5 class win as well, with that position just outside the podium places. On to the podium, and it would be 3rd this weekend for John O'Donnell and Paddy Robinson. They didn't have any issues on this last loop of stages other than catching Fergus O'Meara after his spin, but aside from that it was a good clean finish for the pair. Thomas Davis and Shane Buckley got their new season off to a great start with 2nd place here in Killarney and taking the Class K win as well. They found the last pair of stages tricky and were glad to get to the finish without incident. But taking the win were Dona Kelly and Rory Kennedy. They'd led the rally for most of the day and by the end of the event had built up a 23-second advantage. Their only complaint being the historic lights weren't quite up to the job of the modern ones when it comes to the night stages. So, as the event drew to a close and the winners celebrated in Killarney, here's a reminder of the final overall results for our historic cruise.
Congratulations, you've taken the historic win for 2024. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I feel great. You know, it's something that we've been working towards all year. You know, so now we've done it. We're delighted. You know, so
especially in today's conditions. So great achievement.
Tough, Jesus, tough conditions today. You know, but I think they took Donegal weather down here just to help me along.
You made it to the end. You made it look easy. You made it look fun. Were you happy with it?
Yeah, we had so much fun. That was our only goal, and yeah, super nice day. So yeah, big thanks to the team and all the sponsors. and everybody who made it possible. The rally was amazing. So
And thank you for coming, and we hope to see you here in the future again.
yeah, I hope to come back. Thank you.